The radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody.
The radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and
all right, that's better. Sorry. Welcome everybody to Yaron Brook Show on this Tuesday. Here it's night. It's 8 p.m. East Coast time. I hope all of you are having a great week so far and a good Tuesday. Thanks for joining me. This is our second show today, so I know I'm asking a lot from you guys. All right, we have a full show today. We're going to talk quickly about the Hanania update. He put out an essay yesterday kind of explaining himself. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I don't want to spend too much time on that. But then we'll talk about Oppenheimer. We're going to talk about the movie, which I saw on Sunday. We're going to talk about the atomic bomb and everything that's related to the atomic bomb. You know, the dropping of the atomic bombs, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, all of that. I get a lot of flack for that, so I might as well get it out of the way and see how many subscribers I lose. And then we'll talk about Ayn Rand and Ayn Rand's relationship with Oppenheimer. And she knew Oppenheimer. She met him at least twice. She interviewed him. She was going to write the movie about Oppenheimer. And so I want to give you just a sense of what the Ayn Rand movie about Oppenheimer would look like, or was going to look like, as compared to what we got from Christopher Nolan, and how how fundamentally different the way she looked at movies and at art, particularly literature and movies, So we'll talk about Ayn Rand, Oppenheimer. We'll talk about the atomic bomb, we'll talk about the movie itself. It's quite a movie. I'm curious. Maybe you can tell me in the chat. I'm curious who's seen the movie. I'm wondering if you've seen it. Let me know in the chat if you've seen it, liked it, hated it. I'm curious. I'm curious, kind of the context of the audience. There are spoilers, but then again, if you know much about the story, then you know it's a biographical story. So there's not any real spoilers beyond that. All right, let's jump in. Remind you, we have a big goal in the evenings. It's $650, so that requires a lot of support from you guys. If you can do $20 or more, that is great. That it gets us there quicker. Maximus says he's seen it 4 times. Oh my God! Ryan's seen it. Kairo's seen it. Gail has seen it. Anyway, Rue has seen it. Captain China hasn't. Frank's seen it. All right. And Cook saw it. And Cook has big criticism of it, obviously. And I'm not going to discuss Bobby because my wife refuses to go see Bobby. So I'm not going to see it probably in the theaters. I'll probably have to wait until it gets to streaming and see it then. So I'm not going to go to the theater by myself to see Bobby. And my wife just refuses. She has no interest in seeing Bobby. So there you go. We did see Oppenheimer on Sunday. All right, so just again, $650, $20 questions, 50, 100, 500, 1,000, whatever you can do. I don't think you can do more than 500. It will help us get to the target, and that's great. Exceeding target, even better. Less worry about the rest of the month. There's always suspense about how much do we raise through Super Chat every month. It's never boring. All right, let's get started. Okay, so Richard Hanania, who, just the context, I praised for a long time. I thought some of his essays were excellent and fresh and good perspective. I think he's super smart. And then the Huffington Post had the story where they revealed that he had been a real racist, white supremacist that had written under a pseudonym and written some horrible things about blacks, about minorities generally, and about women, and just the typical. And he did that from 2008, I think, until 2012, and then went on, got a PhD, and so on, and of course now is a very successful tweeter and Substacker. And I have a feeling this crisis, this whole thing, is going to actually increase his following and his support and his visibility. So I think this is actually going to play well for him. Anyway, they revealed that. 2 days later, he wrote this article, Why I Used to Suck and Hopefully No Longer Do. And he writes, My road to small L liberalism. And liberalism here is more of a classical liberalism than a left-wing liberalism, I think. So good for him for admitting that he sucked. That's a great step forward and an important one. And I think it takes. Well, he has no choice at this point. So I think it's good that he wrote it. It's good that he acknowledged. He acknowledges here that the views he held back then were wrong and bad and offensive, and that they sucked, and that he's now over them. And he gives an example, which I gave when I talked about him on Sunday. He's pro-immigration. He's pro-diversity, diversity of just peoples. He used to be. When he was young and a racist, he was a jerk and didn't get along with women. He's now married. He's got a life, and he's written a lot from the perspective that of used to think that women are disastrous for politics, and now he thinks no, that's not quite true, and he recites all the good stuff, like the fact that he's so positive about immigration, but also about generally, I'd say, about what you'd call the liberal world, the democratic, free world, the Western world. He says he's learned a huge amount from Stephen Picker's books, both on violence and on kind of the value of what you'd call relatively free markets that we have today, kind of the mixed economy, the value of the mixed economy. And then he considers himself today a classical liberal. So all good for what it is. I still have two qualms with him and two problems, and I don't know how this is going to play out. I don't know how serious this is. I still respect the good stuff that he's written, and I respect the fact that he's backed off the bad stuff. But I think there are two concerns that I have that are directly related. And the first is that his condemnation of himself, this idea that that he sucked, is a little too soft, a little too nice, right? What does it mean that he sucked? I mean, is there full acknowledgement of the horror and the evil that racism and the kind of views that he held about human beings, men and women, really mean? The kind of history that is manifest from racism, and this kind of view of women, the actual existential consequences of these views. These are evil views, about as evil as it gets, and Yeah, he was a confused kid with psychological problems. There were a lot of confused kids with psychological problems that don't go that route. And it really needs to be a lot more morally condemnatory, in my view, of himself. You can't just say, whoops, sorry, screwed up, over something like this. And you're an intellectual. So your realm is the realm of ideas. The realm of politics, the realm of deeper ideas, particularly politics, though. That's what he does. And you held ideas that are, reprehensible, the evil, the disgusting, the horrific. And there has to be something that has a little bit more passion and oomph to it than I used to suck. I don't suck anymore, believe me. So there's a little bit of him being removed from his past that I don't, I'm not saying he's lying. I don't think he is. I think this is true, and for now, I'll take him at his word. He's doing very well for himself, so he has a strong incentive not to veer off the path that he's on. But I'm going to watch him. I'm going to be careful. I'm not just going to say, okay, back to retweeting everything he says, back to, just treating him like I thought he a real star. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. And the real red flag for me, and I mentioned this on Sunday, but he has no sense of this. He has no, right? So he links to this article again. And he links to this article, and this is an article where I don't know if it's real or not, whether it's a story, real story, a potential story, it doesn't matter. But where he goes with this guy, U-N-C, U-T-Z, and they go and they confront a bunch of racists, and Unz basically shows them how stupid their position is and how ridiculous their position is. And he lists this as, see, I'm not a racist anymore. I'm, in a sense, on Unz's side. But this guy, Ron Unz, is a explicit, uncompromising Unz, U-N-T-Z, anti-Semite, kind of Holocaust denier, kind of, we should, Hitler's being treated maybe a little unjustly. We should really consider it. He didn't know about the extermination of Jews. That wasn't his intention. And we should really rethink Hitler and what he represents. And this isn't really Germany's fault. If you're really repenting, if you're really saying, I'm not a racist anymore, I really think racism is abhorrent, I really think it's horrible, I was dumb, I sucked when I was young. And why would you then say, okay, I'm not a racist, but I'm still an anti-Semite? Or I'm saying, I tolerate anti-Semites, I tolerate racists, but I'm not a racist? I don't know. You don't hang out with a and say nice things about a full-fledged anti-Semite as you're trying to prove to the world that you are now repudiating completely, thoroughly, unequivocally racism and these old views that you had. So this Unz stuff really bugs me, and it's a question of sanction, and that's what's missing here. It's like we should morally judge people, and we should morally judge ourselves. And when you discover that you were immoral in the past, which can happen to all of us, any of us, then that requires a certain judgment, a certain severity, depending on how immoral you were. This is pretty big. And he's not morally judging himself. He's not morally judging Unz. So what is he exactly? What are we talking about? What is he retracting? What is he repenting? What is this new? He's a classical liberal, but he still kind of tolerates anti-Semites when they're interesting. Like he keeps saying uns is interesting. By the way, in the end of the essay, uns suggests that that COVID was an intentional lab leak in the United States by the U.S. government. And Richard's response to that was like, yeah, okay, whatever, that's ridiculous. But there's no judgment. Anyway, so again, I like the material he writes. I'll keep on reading it. I'm going to be retweeting him a lot less. I am going to watch what he does and watch what he says with a little suspicion. And I am going to watch the nuance, right? I mentioned last time IQ. I got into huge trouble. Everybody commented on how ignorant I am about IQ. But as usual. But, it's things like that. How he talks about these things. What he actually says about these things. I'm going to pay attention to those. I'm not just giving him a blank check. He doesn't get a blank check. Anyway, for me, not that he cares, but for me. And we're going to watch him. All right? All right. Great. We'll have to a good start on the reaching our goals. So please don't stop. Keep it coming. Keep the questions coming. So let's jump into Oppenheimer. And first, I want to talk about the movie, and I want to talk about it as a movie. That is the just basically what you would consider a movie review, if you will, of it. And then we'll talk about a little bit about Oppenheimer, moral evaluation of him, the whole project, Los Alamos, the building of the atomic bombs, the use of the atomic bombs, and then we'll talk about Ayn Rand and Ayn Rand's view and the Oppenheimer movie that Ayn Rand wanted to write. Richard asks a relevant question, so I'm gonna jump to this. And he writes, do you think a biopic, biographical film can have a theme? What is the extent to which a director can validly seek to convey a theme and or take creative license in a biographical work? So the answer to that, I think, is yes. I think it can have a theme to the extent that now, if it's a pure biopic, if you're just telling the story as it is, and the whole story, and nothing but the story, then sure, it doesn't really have a theme. But one of the things you do as a filmmaker is you choose what to show. You choose what is important and what is not. You choose what time or period of life to focus on and what periods of life not to focus on. Certainly, Oppenheimer, even though it covers a lot, chooses to focus on certain things and not on others. And through those choices, and through those selective choices, and your orientation, and what you leave out and what you leave in, certainly there is a theme. I think one of the problems with, and then of course there's a broader issue of what the context of which you're telling the story. And here, the theme could have been around the atomic bomb, or Los Alamos, the development of the atomic bomb. There could have been a theme around that, where Oppenheimer's story is told in that context, but it's not a story about Oppenheimer. The story might be the atomic bomb, but it's told through the story of Oppenheimer's life. It's not exactly what happens here, but that's part of the problem. Anyway, I mean, first, let me just say, I think you should see the movie. The movie is it's dramatic, it's powerful, it's beautifully shot. The cinematography is spectacular. There are a few things about the cinematography I don't like, but I'll get to that. It's brilliantly acted. I mean, I think the acting. I hope they get Oscars for this. We'll see, but I think the acting was brilliant. Cillian Murphy, who plays Oppenheimer, is excellent. I know Cillian from his work on Peaky Blinders. I don't know if you guys have seen Peaky Blinders, but it's an excellent show that it basically is. Richard? Did you ask that question twice? I don't know. No, it appears here twice for some reason, but you only asked it once. He appears in Peaky Blinders, which is a gangster movie, against a series, I think the 5 or 6 seasons. And he's brilliant in it. He's just a brilliant actor in it, and he's very good here. He captures a lot of the subtlety of Oppenheimer, a lot of the conflict, and he does it very, very well. Robert Downey Jr. is excellent in this, playing kind of the bad guy, a political wannabe, kind of somebody who's very ambitious beyond what he should be, and I think that was a fantastic performance. I mean, even Matt Damon is very good in this. I think he plays his part really well. Kind of the understated general who oversees the whole Los Alamos project. Rami Malek has a very small bit in it, but he's good in it. Florence Pugh, who plays Oppenheimer's girlfriend, and Emily Blunt, who plays his wife, are both excellent. So great cast, really amazing, beautiful cinematography, very, very powerful, very dramatic. And look, at the end of the day, whatever you think of the story, and whatever you think of the movie even, well, not whatever you think, well, whatever you think of Oppenheimer as a human being, or whatever you think of the movie, the story is amazing. The story is amazing. It tells you the story in highlights, of course, of the development of the nuclear bomb, of the atomic bomb. It's a fascinating story, and it tells you the story of Oppenheimer's, communist sympathies and the trouble he got for those sympathies after the war, during the McCarthy era, and how his security clearance was taken away from him. So all of that, you get a period piece. You get a fascinating look at the world of that era, and you get it, and you're doing that through the eyes of, one of the great, I think, directors of our time, Christopher Nolan, and you get it in heightened dramatic fashion. It's an interesting movie. It's doing supposedly very well in the theaters. A lot of people have gone to see it. It's raking in a lot of money. And I have to say, it's really surprising. It's surprising because the movie is complex. It's going on in at least 3 different time periods. You've got different flashbacks and different points in time to different places. You kind of have to stitch it all together and keep track of everything. So it's not an easy movie to watch. It's a challenge. You're working, and we'll get to that. I think that's actually a problem with the movie. But you're working to keep track of everything. You're working to keep track of the characters. You're working to keep track of motivation. But you're mainly working just to keep track of the time zone, right? Which time period the particular scene is happening right now. But it's a movie where dialogue is king. This is a movie of words. It's a super intellectual movie. This is not an action movie. There are no car chases. There's a big explosion, but small explosions otherwise, but one big explosion. There's some special effects early on, in a sense, describing, I think, the mental processes that are going inside of Oppenheimer's head. Again, I didn't particularly like those, but trying to give us a sense there's some genius going on here. But there's no action. There's a little bit of suspense, but it's kind of intellectual suspense. There really isn't any action. There's no real mystery. This is a character study. It's a historical study. It's a commentary on a particular period of time. its history. Why are people going to see it? I mean, I'm impressed. All I can say is I'm impressed. I wouldn't have expected this kind of energy. I don't think it's boring. I don't think but I'm surprised in a culture where the next superhero movie is what everybody's interested, everybody's talking about, everybody goes and see, where sequel after sequel after sequel, where the more you blow things up, the better the movie does. An intelligent movie like this is just stunning that is doing so well. I mean, I don't know. I think it's a positive statement on the culture. Maybe there's a real desire for dialogue-driven, character-driven, complex plots that tell an interesting, fascinating, amazing story about human beings. Wow. Wouldn't that be kind of revolutionary? Let me just say, take a second to say thank you to Dylan, who just did his first super chat, and he did it for $50. So thank you, Dylan. We'll get to the questions at the end. So once I'm finished with the topic, but thank you. Yeah, we're about halfway to where we need to be, and in less than half an hour. That's great. Thank you, guys. So the movie's super intelligent. It's a smart movie. I think the dialogue is sharp. I think the dialogue is interesting. I think everything about this is interesting. The challenge with the movie is that it doesn't really know what it's saying. It doesn't really have a theme. There's a sense in which it has two basic stories. It has the story of Los Alamos, which primarily is a heroic story, but a heroic story tainted with a sense of, responsibility, fear, and angst, focused on the fact that a weapon of mass destruction, like mankind have not known before, has just been unleashed. So a certain justification for the angst and the worry. So that's certainly part of the theme and part of it, and part of the whole. And you're never quite sure at the end what Oppenheimer thinks of all of it. That is he? Yeah, we had to do it, and it's a good thing, and it's very unclear, and he's very focused towards the end on we should negotiate with the Soviets, as if negotiating with evil ever works and as ever worthwhile, and we should have control of these things, and so it kind of undermines, I think, part of the heroism and the achievement that is the building of the bomb. So that's one story. It's the bomb, the building of it, the achievement that is to build. I think that it's really fascinating. His attitude towards other scientists, the way they work together, the way they achieve what they achieve, and at the same time the inner conflict that is within him, which goes throughout the whole movie. That's the one theme that goes throughout the whole movie, is the inner conflict about this particular project that Oppenheimer, and that never really gets resolved. And maybe the answer that Christopher Nolan will tell us is, well, it just doesn't get resolved. There is no resolution to it. He's torn, and he always will be torn. And if you ask Christopher Nolan, what do you think, Christopher Nolan? He'd probably say, I'm torn too. So there's no resolution to that. The second theme that runs through much of the movie, because of the way it's structured with flash forwards and flashbacks and so on, is this theme of persecution, the theme of political persecution around, in a sense, there are three themes, right? Three storylines. The second storyline is the storyline of persecution around the fact that he had contacts, that he was sympathetic to communism. Then, even when he stopped being sympathetic to communism, he had contacts with communists during Los Alamos and afterwards, and this is in the context of that somebody stole the Los Alamos secrets and provided them to the Russians. If you know the history, it's pretty much been proven that it wasn't Oppenheimer. We know who the people were, who Fuchs, one of the physicists there, provided the information to the Soviets, as did a few others. So there was a number of people providing the information, giving the nuclear secrets to the Soviets. They didn't sell them because they didn't need to, because they were sympathizers with communism. So it wasn't Oppenheimer. So there's that theme of, is he a communist? Was he a communist? Did he commit treason? How do we treat him, given that he's an American hero, but at the same time undermined it, still has maybe some sympathies to communism? How do we relate to that? And again, the movie is ambiguous. It doesn't really take a stand on communism and on good, bad, how we should view all this. And then the third is a storyline about basically an ambitious American politician who basically seeks vengeance because he thinks that Oppenheimer has slighted him, and seeks vengeance against him. And in seeking vengeance, there is an opportunity then for Oppenheimer to be redeemed as a hero. So again, a complex story because you have all these three themes. Now, do all these three add up to anything? And it certainly seems that they add up to a heroic view of Oppenheimer, a positive view of Oppenheimer, a kind of a non-committal view of the affiliation with communism and what it all means. Certainly a critique of American politics and the way they were handled and the people involved in the American political system and the FBI, because they basically, the harassment of Oppenheimer, and then, the Schultz guy, the guy played by Robert Downey Jr., Louis Strauss, who is trying to just seek political power at Oppenheimer's expense, and that again is a critique of kind of the politics of it all. So it's ambiguous in terms of the political stature. So I think a really good movie, you're in the universe. You're right there. You're emotionally connected with the story. You're mostly connected with the characters. And I have to say, the jumping around timelines, while interesting, and interesting to follow and interesting to keep track of, and the dialogue is interesting and it's got a pace to it, it leaves you a little bit emotionally removed, because instead of just sinking in and being in that world and following the story and living that story in that world, you're constantly shifting worlds and you're constantly having to keep track of where you are. I think that's just a problem with these kind of movies that go from... So while I found it interesting and stimulating, it wasn't as a emotionally satisfying and emotionally embracing experience. And again, I'm not sure, and I'd have to watch it again, and I probably will watch Oppenheimer again. It's a complex enough movie worthy of it. I'll probably watch it again because I am interested in if does it add up to anything? Does the movie add up to one theme, to one definitive take on Oppenheimer, right? On Oppenheimer. All right, so that's the movie. I definitely recommend seeing it. It really is an intellectual movie. It's a movie worth supporting. I'd like to see more movies made like this about serious topics, serious stories, great actors that are dramatic, character and dialogue driven. It doesn't completely engage you emotionally, because I think of the jumping around, but there's also the fun and the challenge of keeping track of all of that, so definitely worth seeing. I do want to say something about the whole project, and somewhat the way it's of Los Alamos in particular, and the way it's depicted in the movie, and here maybe here is the point to really bring up Ayn Rand. So after 1945, after the bombs were dropped and the war ended, in 1946 there was a real desire for a movie around that would be a dramatization of what happened in Los Alamos and the development of the nuclear bomb. And Hal Wallace, who had been the producer of famous movies like Casablanca and other very famous movies, took on the project and signed up Ayn Rand to work on creating a treatment for this movie. The movie was going to be called Top Secret, and she was assigned the responsibility of writing a treatment, and ultimately with the idea that ultimately she would write a script for it. Rand took this super seriously. She viewed this movie as, maybe you can find her thoughts on this. There's a whole chapter on this in the Ayn Rand journals. This is the Journals of Ayn Rand, a really fascinating book, really interesting. Anyway, you can find here, she writes about how important she thinks this topic is. And she says, look, the atomic bomb is a hugely serious issue. It has the potential for mankind to destroy itself. It has the potential to destroy human life on planet Earth. And if we're going to take on the responsibility, and this is 1946, if we're going to take on the responsibility of doing a movie about this, we have to really think through what this bomb means, and what are the potential damage that can be done. Now, this is before she knew, we knew, anybody knew that the Soviet Union had a bomb already. I don't think they had it in 46. I think that was 48. So at this point, the Soviets hadn't got a bomb. And she basically said, look, if we're going to do a movie about the bomb, it needs to project, and she said, look, the bomb was necessary, it was amazing, it ended the war, and I think she viewed all of that as positives. But it has this capacity. But the capacity for destruction of the bomb is only if the bomb is in the hands of evil people. It's only in the hands of authoritarians, statists, collectivists. I mean, she articulates this case, and as I was reading this, it was kind of stunning because it so reminds me of what's going on in Ukraine right now. She said, when authoritarian regimes, and this is true of World War II, when Hitler, conquered another country, he tried not to bomb their manufacturing plants and things like that, because immediately when he took over the other country, he got the manufacturing for him. Or they basically looted all the equipment and brought it back to Germany and built stuff. The Russians, when they occupied Poland, they immediately took all the manufacturing and took it back to Russia, and where they used it for themselves. That is, dictators invade other countries to loot. To loot. And I was thinking of what's going on in Ukraine right now, and if you follow what's going on in Ukraine, when the Russians took over the very industrial areas of eastern and southern Ukraine, basically the first thing they did is they went in and they stole all the equipment and they moved it to Russia. They emptied out the factories. They took all that productive activity, all that productive capital, and they stole it. And they moved it into Russia. They looted the place because authoritarians go to war in order to loot, among other things, right? And she says the Allies did exactly the opposite. The Allies, when bombing Germany, bombed all its productive capacity. Because they weren't there to loot. They were there to destroy evil and get on with life. They weren't there to loot Germany. They weren't there to steal from Germany. They were there to defend themselves. And defend themselves by ridding themselves of the threat. And to rid themselves of the threat, they had to destroy the productive capabilities of the enemy. She says the nuclear weapon is not an offensive weapon in that sense. Because a nuclear weapon is a destructive weapon. It destroys everything. You can't loot it afterwards. There's radioactivity, everything is destroyed, everything is mangled. But you can use it to defend yourself. You can use it to crush the enemy and make it clear to them that they cannot win. Indeed, that they will lose. It's exactly what the United States did in Japan. It's a defensive weapon in that it crushes the enemy. She said there's no problem with an atomic bomb in the hands of free countries. The problem is in the hands of unfree countries. And the challenge, of course, is how do we make sure that a free country doesn't become unfree? How do we make sure that America, with its nuclear arsenal, doesn't become an unfree country, a totalitarian, authoritarian country? Well, she hoped that this movie would help in making sure that didn't happen, in projecting important pro-freedom values. So her movie about Oppenheimer, and she went and she interviewed Oppenheimer twice. She interviewed many of the people associated with Los Alamos. She interviewed Leslie Grove, the General Leslie Grove. She interviewed a number of the scientists. And her whole theme, the theme that she had for her movie, the theme that she wanted to project in Top Secret in this movie, was that only, and think about this in the context of Atlas Shrugged. Now, this is 1946. So she's finished The Fountainhead. Fountainhead's been published. And she's about to start on Atlas Shrugged, but she hasn't really started on Atlas Shrugged. But the theme of this movie she's writing is in many ways so similar to the theme of Atlas, because the theme of the movie is that only free minds can create great achievement. That minds under authoritarianism are chained and therefore cannot achieve. And she was going to contrast Hitler's nuclear program with Los Alamos' nuclear program and show that Hitler's nuclear program had to fail, indeed did fail, had to fail. And that only a free country could develop a nuclear weapon. You know, without stealing, as the Soviet Union actually ultimately did. Right? And so her whole conception of the arc of the story only focused on Los Alamos, it focused on Oppenheimer, but only as the guy who organized Los Alamos. And it was focused on showing that it was freedom, the freedom of the scientists to think, to challenge each other, to question, to engage with one another, to experiment, to try things, to fail, to succeed. It was the freedom of businesses, and this is something she emphasizes in her movie, but in Christopher Nolan's movie doesn't really appear at all. She emphasizes this idea that you couldn't have built the atomic bomb without American business. And that's absolutely true. It was DuPont that built the factories where I think the uranium was refined. Refined is the wrong word. Anyway, I mean, the bombs themselves are constructed from materials and shapes and everything required American industry participating freely, voluntarily, as they did. And she was going to highlight that. So she was going to make the American businessman heroic, not just the scientist. She was going to emphasize with the scientist something that the movie does, I think, do a fairly good job. And that is that almost all the scientists working on the project, almost all of them, with the exception of Oppenheimer, and maybe one or two others, are refugees. Enriching uranium, that's right, not refining, enriching. Refugees. Refugees who are escaping Hitler, escaping the Nazis. Indeed, Neil Boers, who shows up in the movie here, at some point, is rescued from Europe in the middle of the war by the British, and is brought to Los Alamos. He doesn't really participate much in Los Alamos, but he's there. He consults with Oppenheimer, consults with him. But Neil Boers is approached by the Nazis and by the scientists working for the Nazis, and they try to get him to work for them, and he refuses, of course. Niles, like Boer. Right? So this idea that refugees, people with minds, are not going to tolerate Hitler, are not going to stay with Hitler, and they're going to leave. So it's really is, the story is fascinating. Again, the movie does, I think, a pretty good job showing this. Ayn Rand would have emphasized this. Oppenheimer told her in an interview, nobody gave orders in Los Alamos. We had to give reasons. Everything was reasoned. Everything was explained. And I think the movie illustrates that. Again, I think an Ayn Rand movie would have done a lot more of that. So for Rand, what she wanted to project is this idea of freedom. Because she said, if you don't link freedom with the bomb, if you don't link free minds, free enterprise, capitalism, political freedom with the bomb, then you're doing real damage. You're doing, in a sense, real evil. Because the bomb in the hands of unfree, the bomb in a culture that doesn't appreciate freedom, is truly devastating and truly horrific and can truly destroy the world. So it's fascinating. I highly encourage you to read Ayn Rand journals. Read this chapter, Top Secret, if you have the book. It's available. If you don't have the book, you should buy the book. The book is fantastic. There's a whole section here on her notes on the moral basis of individualism. And really, really, you get to see her thought process, right? Her journals, what she's writing. And in that chapter, there is the entire treatment that she submitted to Wallace in terms of not a script, but a treatment on how the movie would progress. So you get a sense of the entire movie, which is amazing. Sadly, a competing studio was working on its own version of the story of Los Alamos, and how Wallace ultimately sold Ayn Rand's treatment of all of Ayn Rand's notes and everything Ayn Rand did to that studio, and dumped the project. So that studio, of course, took over all Ayn Rand stuff and put it in the trash. They bought it from Hal Wallace basically to kill a competing project, not to make the movie themselves. And so, unfortunately, we'll never have the Ayn Rand version of Top Secret unless somebody takes the treatment that she wrote and turns it into a real script and actually makes the movie, which would be really super cool if we had that movie. It's a really philosophical, intellectual movie that really is geared towards illustrating this point about free minds and what free minds can achieve, and what in the fact that under Hitler, you cannot achieve. You cannot build a bomb. You cannot build a bomb. All right. There was a TV series that I saw a while back called The Heavy Water War, which was about the Nazis' attempt to build an atomic weapon. Heisenberg was in charge of that, the physicist, and the reliance on heavy water from Norway, an attempt of the Norway Underground and the British to destroy the capacity of the Norwegians to provide the heavy water for the project, but also the fact that the scientists themselves could not really advance because of the stupidity of the Nazis and because some of them sabotaged the projects themselves, right? Anyway, so I thought it was a really interesting series called The Heavy Water War, and if you know any other movies, TV series about this period and about Los Alamos, or about this, I encourage you to share it. I'm definitely interested in it. James, your other super chats disappeared into the ether. I noticed them early on and I forgot to save them, and they don't appear because if you do them really early, they go. So what I suggest, James, is if you write them in the regular chat, I'll just copy paste them and answer them as a super chat question. So I do know we have an additional $40 that James did really early on. So the money stuck, the questions did not. I think the money stuck. I'm pretty sure it did. All right, let's see. What else do we have? So that's my review of the movie, of the period. I think my assessment, Oppenheimer is definitely a hero. He's a mixed character. Oh, I should say this. Because he's such a mixed character, because he flirted with communism, and because he was torn inside, and what Ayn Rand observed when she met him was a real arrogance that he reflected, a kind of aloofness, a little bit of a kind of somebody who's better than everybody else, and who looks down at people. Now, he was very nice to Ayn Rand, had a great conversation once he realized the kind of movie she wanted to make. He was very open, met more than once, walked her to the car, had a long conversations with her. But she definitely got this sense of, somebody who's not, who under the right circumstance are willing to sell his soul to the state because he thinks he's so important. And of course, she took that character, she took the Oppenheimer, and she placed him in Atlas Shrugged. And for her, Oppenheimer is, right, what's Oppenheimer's first name? Robert. Anybody know of a Robert, a scientist, Robert, in Atlas Shrugged? It's Robert Stadler. And in the biographical interviews that Ayn Rand did in 1960, she described how Oppenheimer was a model for Robert Stadler. Super intelligent, super smart, a lover of science, right? But somebody who thought everybody else was lesser and of less important, and ultimately was willing to sell out to the state in order to achieve it. Now Ayn Rand didn't think he did that with the atomic bomb. But she thought he had the character, and maybe again his flirtations with communism suggested to her that, at heart he was a statist. He was a kind of a statist, and partially because he was just superior to everybody else. He was just not interested in the common man. So Oppenheimer definitely is kind of inspired Stadler. And again, when she met him, she was already in the planning stages of Atlas, and so it left an impact. Let me do this. I have to copy down James's questions. All right, I got one. Let's see if I get it. Oops, wrong place. All right, got one. And we'll see where the other one is. I don't see it yet. All right. Let's see, what else? By the way, we're only $160 short of our goal, so we're really, really close to achieving our goal. We got a lot of $20, $50, $100, so this is great. I really, really appreciate the support, guys. All right, what else did I want to say? Yeah, so I have a huge admiration for Oppenheimer. Not only was he a great scientist, from everything I understand, but one of the things that characterized him, which is unique for scientists, is his ability to orchestrate everything that happened at Los Alamos. His ability to get the scientists, to convince them to come, to provide kind of the right motivation to them, to organize them into teams, to integrate. Because part of the way they kept it secure, at least to some extent, is they kept everybody compartmentalized. Oppenheimer was the great integrator. He was the guy who integrated all the pieces that came to him. His ability to integrate like that is stunning. His ability to manage the politics of it, the military, the politicians, and to manage all these scientists and all the practical stuff that needed to get done, and that was part of Los Alamos. I mean, it truly takes a unique character to do that. And one of the things that I think make General Leslie Grove, the character that Matt Damon plays, so inspiring and such an important person, is that he recognized this in Oppenheimer and hired him. He's the guy who gave Oppenheimer the job, although Oppenheimer, in a sense, hired himself. But Oppenheimer had that ability of integration. In spite of being a scientist, a dorky scientist, stuck to the blackboard, focused on, a grand vision of how the world works and how physics works, and quantum mechanics and stuff that I don't understand. He also had the managerial skill and the integrated mind to be able to put it all together to practical use. So here's a practical scientist who could take all that and then build a bomb, and the bomb works. And that is amazing, right? That is amazing. So I encourage you to watch the movie. I encourage you to learn about Oppenheimer and learn generally about Los Alamos. The achievement is massive, and it's for a good cause. It saved hundreds of thousands of lives, if not a million lives. It is truly an amazing story, and so the Manhattan Project, super interesting, super fascinating, super exciting, and Oppenheimer's role, unquestionably heroic, and amazing, just intellectual achievement. His ability to integrate it all. All right, that's an hour. Wow, we've already gone an hour. We've got a ton of questions, so we're gonna answer those questions. We've got about 120 people watching live right now. We're short about $158, so let's make sure that we make our target given how much money we've already raised. This is great. All right, Harper Campbell says, so this relates to the Hanania issue. I agree with you that racism is crude and unintellectual. Although many intellectuals have adopted racial interpretations of the world like Hanania, even respectable intellectuals always revert to race and class explanations for success and failure of different groups. Unfortunately, that is true. It doesn't change the fact that racism and this obsession with race, focus on race, is as anti-intellectual, as non-intellectual and anti-intellectual as one can get. There is no content to racism. There's no body of theoretical knowledge. There's no, there's some empirics, and they always come to the IQ because there's not much empirics. So they always gravitate towards the one thing that they have. But there is no theoretical basis for the kind of crude racism. You could argue that critical race theory is as close to a theory of, racism. But that, there you're really debating critical theory as it's applied to race. But I'm talking about the kind of racism that has traditionally permeated the world, right? Has traditionally been around. It's just empty. It just has no content. And this is why I'll never debate that kind of racist. I might debate somebody who believes in CRT because there's some content there. There's no content in white supremacists. There's no content in xenophobic nationalism. There's no content in just the I hate somebody because of his skin color. It's just emotionalism, and there's no debate. My emotions against their emotions. So no. And it's in the fact that some intellectuals revert to it is their laziness. It's their lack of intellectuality. It's their the best scenario is it's laziness. The worst scenario is they're thoroughly corrupt. There's a deep corruption in their thinking and in what they believe. All right. Michael asks, I noticed that the right is rejecting individualism and the pursuit of happiness because they think individualism leads to loneliness and narcissism, and the pursuit of happiness leads to hedonism. So Christian theocracy seems like the only reasonable antidote. Yeah, but you're giving them way too much credit. They don't think any of that. There's no thinking involved. They are lying to you and to themselves in trying to implicate individualism with loneliness and narcissism and hedonism. There's no evidence in the world that those two are connected. There's no reason to think that individualism is that. I mean, individualism is to be lonely, but individualism is not to be Steve Jobs. That's unindividualistic. I mean, you have to be an invader on a massive scale. And that's exactly what the Christian theocracy theologians are. They're just making stuff up in order to achieve the goal that they want to achieve. And that is to make individualism look bad. But again, they make no argument. There is no argument that individualism leads to loneliness. There are plenty of individualists out there that everybody knows that are not lonely, or that pursuit of happiness leads to hedonism. I mean, if you go up to them, how many people are pursuing their happiness in some way or another? Are they all hedonists? Are we writing them all off? So it's evasion and it's purposeful deception that the Christian theocrats and generally the right is engaged in when they make those kind of assertions. Dylan, thank you, Dylan, for your first super chat, $50. I just finished Peikoffs' series on induction in physics. Do you agree that philosophy has veto power on physics? What do you think about modern physics, quantum physics, and the like? I know Rand had a stance on Heisenberg, on the Heisenberg principle in OPAR. look, I think absolutely philosophy has a veto power over physics. I think to the extent that physics and philosophy contradict, then one has to go back and assuming your philosophy is sound, one has to go back and look at the physics. One has to go back and look not at the phenomena. The phenomena is what it is. Quantum phenomena is what it is. It's more a question of how we understand it, what it represents. And look, philosophy doesn't tell you what the definition, for example, of matter and a wave and is. And it could be that all these things that we take for granted from Newtonian physics need to be redefined, need to be rethought, reconceived. But philosophy tells you that contradictions cannot exist. That has veto power on ethics. It tells you that A is A, that something has identity. And it functions, causality means that it acts based on that identity. That is veto. Now, I have no doubt that the quantum phenomena, which is real, and the quantum math that describes something that's real, will be explained. And people have made attempts, and you can argue whether they've succeeded or not, but people have made attempts, will be explained. In a way that is consistent with A is A, things act based on their nature, all of that, right? So a problem is not what we're observing. A problem is the explanation of what we observe. And math is an explanation of what we observe. Math maybe is a description in a particular format of what we observe, but not an explanation. So what we need is an explanation for those things. I don't have an explanation for the quantum phenomena, but I'm not a physicist. Why would I have one? Philosophers don't have an interpretation of the quantum phenomena. Why would they? They're not physicists. So, look, there's no doubt in my mind that much of modern physics, maybe not all of modern physics, but much of modern physics, is describing real phenomena, right? And look, we've had now experiments that have proven Einstein's theorems right, and we've got plenty of experiments that show the quantum phenomena. But given the state of philosophy, when much of this physics was discovered, given that philosophy was pretty primitive and bad and detached from reality and non-objective, yeah, it's not surprising that the ability to explain these phenomena is retarded. And work needs to be done. And work will be done by physicists and by philosophers of science to bridge the gap between metaphysics and the phenomena that we are observing. I mean, I don't have an opinion on Heisenberg's principle. As described, it's nonsense, right? The cat is either there or it's not there. It can't be there and not there at the same time. It can be A and non-A at the same time. So it is what it is. Maybe we don't completely understand what it is that Heisenberg's describing. Maybe we don't understand the phenomena itself. And look, at the end of the day, I think Einstein's right. Nature it's not, in that sense, it's not a probabilistic issue. It might be probabilistic from our perspective, from the perspective of we don't understand enough of the variables to know with certainty how things will act. So all we can do is put a probability on it. But it is metaphysically probabilistic. I doubt it. But again, maybe that's a physical phenomena we need to grapple with. So, I'm thinking of Schrodinger's cat. That's right, not Heisenberg. I'm thinking of Schrodinger. Anyway, Heisenberg is the uncertainty principle. It's you can't know where the particle is, and it's velocity at the same time, something like that. You can't know both parameters about it. You can only know one, and where it is and its velocity are all probabilistic. Look, it's just an issue of philosophy of science and physicists getting to the right explanation of the whole thing, right? I don't think cause and effect break down in the quantum realm. We have to think more creatively about understanding how cause and effect function in the quantum realm. That's the challenge. Right? So you have to know what realm you're in, metaphysics, epistemology, and you have to know what it is that you're describing. Right? Is it our understanding, or is it what's actually in reality? Is it our ability to comprehend, or is it what's actually going on out there? And again, there are a lot of different theories. Some objectivists that come up with attempts to explain quantum physics. I think there are at least 2 or 3. I don't know if they're right or not. I don't know the field. I'm not. It's beyond my pay grade. Right? It's not. And the idea, I find it interesting that objectivists, when they're young, they get involved in these lengthy conversations about physics. How many people know physics? Physics is hard. Physics is really hard. And it's complicated. And it's super abstract. And, I think you have to be really careful. And, with all due respect, I don't think Dave Hammond gets it right. I think his views on modern physics, he's too dismissive of modern physics. I think Hammond is way too dismissive of modern physics. And that, I think, is unfortunate. In the Q&As of his talks and in his books, he dismisses modern physics too fast. He dismisses Einstein too quickly. Dismisses a lot of the quantum stuff too quickly. There is, and there needs to be, a rational explanation for all of this, and one that's consistent with objective reality, with objectivism. The fact that we don't have it, it doesn't bother me. I'm like, I don't know. One of the most powerful things you can say in life is, I don't know. To pretend that you know something you don't know is very dangerous. And to force yourself to have an opinion about something, we must all have opinions. All right, Richard, would your evaluation of Hanania's self-criticism change if you weren't a public intellectual? I'm not familiar with this story, but when can one forgive oneself for having abhorrent views after careful introspection and rejecting them? Yes. And if you're not a public intellectual, that's enough, right? You reject them. But when you're a public intellectual, then you have to articulate what is bad about their ideas and how they've been destructive. And you have to, I think, and here's my criticism, is I don't get the sense from what he wrote, I don't get that he has a sense of the full weightiness of how bad those ideas were and what they meant and what they represent and how hurtful they are and how destructive they've been in human history. I'm not challenging that he's decided they suck, but that sounds very floating and intellectual. Yeah, I was wrong. I've moved on. And part of it is the fact that, of course, somebody had to reveal it and discover it, that he never did a mea culpa by himself. Is of course part of this, right? That part of my concern, right? That if you fully take your idea seriously, wouldn't you want to clarify this before somebody discovered it? So it's the weightiness of it. Does he really get it? And I don't think he does. I think it's still a game for him. It was a game for him when he was young and he played this game. I mean, but what was interesting, I found really interesting, the one thing that I found really interesting was that how he articulated why he became a racist, why he was interested in these ideas, is because he hated the left. So in hating the left, he wanted to do the exact opposite of the left and go to the full extreme of it. And I've been saying that this is the motivation for so many people for so long. And I've been saying that hatred of the left will lead to that. And the dangers of motivation from hate. And I think Hanania really reflects that in his essay. So it's definitely worth reading. And this is what hatred of the left can lead to. And this is what not paying attention to who you're aligning with can lead to. All right, thank you, Richard. All right, let's see. So we're still about $150 short. So, eight $20 questions get us there. 3 $50 questions get us there. So, 16 $10 questions get us there. So please consider asking a question, or just, we've got over 100 people watching right now. Just a sticker with some support. If you don't have a question, would be great. Just a value for value. If you like the show, if you appreciate it, if you thought it was interesting, then just something. All right, let's see. It's funny to me that Scott dislikes Hanania now. Now, the Hanania of today he dislikes because he's too soft. He's like classical liberal. He's too soft. He's not rabidly hatred of the left enough, right? I think Scott would have liked him when he was more of a little bit more of a kind of a racist or something like that. It really is. It's amazing to me. I mean, Hanania now is as I said, a lot of his stuff is really good in terms of his analysis, but it's not filled with hatred of the left quite enough for some people to like it. This is the culture we live in. All right, what are your thoughts? This is from James G, who asked a question first, but they were wiped out by YouTube, so he reposted them. What are your thoughts on taxing wealth versus income? The USA taxes wealth and the UK taxes income. A great example is council taxes capped at $20,000 and below. I don't really understand that. I mean, the US taxes income, it doesn't tax wealth. The US, the primary form of taxation in the US is income tax, and I think that's true in the UK as well. The United States does not have a wealth tax. It does have a capital gains tax, but it doesn't have a wealth tax. It does have a corporate tax, but so does the UK. So I'm not sure there's a difference. I think taxing wealth is horrific. I think taxing income is awful, evil, despicable. I think they're both terrible, right? So there's no explicit wealth tax in the United States. There's no explicit wealth tax in the United States. Elizabeth Warren has proposed one. I wouldn't be surprised if Tucker Carlson and J.D. Vance supported one, but we don't have a wealth tax yet in the U.S. There's a death tax, which is kind of a wealth tax, but there's also a lot of opportunity to get out of the wealth tax if you structure your state right, and if you don't die with too much money, but too much for the IRS. But I don't get. I'm not sure where you're coming at, James, in terms of the difference between the US and the UK in terms of taxation. It strikes me that they're much more similar than they are different. And I don't know enough about the UK tax system to see the differences between them. Both tax income. The United States taxes income at very, very high rates. If you count Social Security and Medicare, over 40% at the federal level, and then you could get up to 13% in a place like California at the state level. So well over 50%, depending on the state you live in. Then he asked, does it make sense to start in the U.S. and then transition to a place focused on taxing income? Do you think more people will come to America to create wealth and leave to protect their wealth? Again, I think this assumes something that I don't think is true. You come to the U.S., you're going to be taxed on income straight away. I mean, they take it right out of your salary. It's called withholding. And they don't tax your wealth. Your capital gains they tax, but not your wealth. So I don't think there's a place that doesn't tax income. I don't know where they don't tax income. You certainly want to stay away from places that tax wealth. Taxing wealth is a way to destroy economic growth and economic progress. Oh wow, the lucky day 84, a first-time super chatter We have 2 first-time super chatters. Both of them did $50, so thank you. That is amazingly generous, and I really, really appreciate the support and the value for value. So thank you. All right, let's go through the super chats here, and I'll watch for James G if he's going to, maybe I missed something about his question. Adam says, in an earlier show, you said you had seen Luo Li Rong's sculpture in person. Are you at liberty to tell us where? I think I've seen it in some galleries. I think a few years ago in Las Vegas, maybe. I don't know if Quint Codet has it. Maybe in the galleries in Laguna Beach. I'm not sure, but I'm just thinking of those are the galleries that I frequented over the years, and that have representational sculpture. So I would say I would look in La Jolla in San Diego, Laguna Beach in California, and in Orange County, and Las Vegas, in some of the galleries in Las Vegas. James Taylor, I watched Vivek debate David Pakman. Pretty impressive. It's nice to see a young, articulate tech giant intellectual on the right who's not afraid to debate leftists. Can he beat Biden if he's the nominee? Yeah, I think anybody can beat Biden except Trump. But I'm not as impressed as you are with Vivek. He's got some really horrific views on a bunch of different topics, and he is way too differential to Trump, way too nice to Trump. But maybe that's just good politics. I do have a feeling that much of what he says he doesn't really believe, but he's just playing to his audience. But I find a lot of his views, and his views on Russia and Ukraine war, his views on, I don't know, not so much his views on 9/11, but the fact that he plays to the conspiracy theorists, even though he doesn't maybe buy the conspiracy theories, he plays to them, not a healthy thing. But yeah, I definitely think he can beat Biden. Again, I think any Republican right now, maybe with one or two exceptions, can beat Biden. Biden's super vulnerable to an articulate Republican. And Vivek will have to change his tone about certain issues in order to win. Once he wins the primary, you have to have one kind of voice for the primary and one voice for the general election. As we get close to debates and all of that, I'll look more closely at his policy prescription and critique it more rigorously, not depend on my memory of what he said or didn't say. Michael says, were Einstein and Oppenheimer actually worried the Nazis were capable of producing a nuclear bomb before us? Was that even a possibility given the Nazis were annihilating the smartest, most educated members of their society? I don't think so. Oppenheimer didn't really think of it as a race. He didn't really think the Nazis would get there faster than them, although he worried that they would ultimately, and he definitely used that the Nazis are trying to do this in order to motivate scientists to come and work for him. There were enough German scientists left in Germany to make a run at it, and given enough time and maybe the ability to steal some knowledge from other scientists, maybe they could have done it, but they certainly couldn't have done it in time. And I don't think they've had a full understanding of how the Nazis would, in a sense, never let it happen because they're not capable of leaving people free long enough to be able to make it happen. But he did tell Ayn Rand that he did not think this was a race against the Nazis. And the movie shows him talking to other scientists about it, but they all come to the conclusion very early that the Nazis have taken a wrong turn somewhere. And look, they all respected Heisenberg. They respected Heisenberg's ability, and he was managing the nuclear project for Hitler, and that's what they worried about. But I think they very early realized that Hitler, the German project was not going to be a threat to them. Michael, I wish Ayn Rand had wrote more about philosophical corruption of physics. I believe Einstein and Oppenheimer both rejected the interpretation of quantum mechanics and Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Certainly Einstein did. I mean, he called it God playing dice with the universe. I don't know that Oppenheimer rejected Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Oppenheimer was certainly a quantum physicist, but quite a number of physicists have rejected Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. There are alternatives that were proposed at the time. So Heisenberg's is not the only one. It's the one that has the most appeal to kind of Kantian philosophers, to people influenced by Kant's philosophy. But it's certainly not the only interpretation of quantum physics out there. Linda, thank you for the support. Really, really appreciate it. All right. Liam, off topic, but do you think many, if not most people today, don't like being alone with their own thoughts? That's why they either become workaholics or alcoholics. This may also explain the opioid crisis. Yes, I think that's right. I think people are lonely. They don't have social connections, very strong social connections. I think people have a lot of free time. I think some people who are not workaholics have a lot of free time and they don't know what to do with it. And that makes them alcoholics and opioid addicts and suicide, people who are inclined toward suicide. And I think some people become workaholics, and I think workaholic is the better approach, right? The workaholics at least are not engaged in the kind of self-destructive that the alcoholics and the drug addicts are engaged in. But yes, I definitely think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that people don't know what to do with themselves when they're alone, and they don't know how to form healthy social relationships. They don't know how to take the initiative with regard to social relationships. This is particularly with regard to men who don't know how to do this, and then they get stuck alone and they get very depressed, and it's very, very difficult for them. So they don't know how to be alone, and they don't know how to be not alone. They don't know how to create a social contact, healthy social environment. All right, we're $80 short, 4 $20 questions, and we're done. We're so close, guys, so close. Richard, Hitler banned theoretical physics in German universities, calling it Jewish physics. Today, China requires AI to adhere to socialist principles, to socialist values. Man's mind must be free for innovation to occur. Yes, I mean, it's one of the reasons I have said over and over again that I think China's in decline. All the economic numbers coming to China that show it are not surprising to me. The more authoritarian China becomes, the more in decline it will be. Yes, to achieve great things, you need to be free. You need to be free. And this is true in America as well. As we become less free, as we question speech, as we question people's opinions, if we don't allow people to express themselves, we don't allow people to think out of the box. To that extent, we will limit, and of course regulation, we limit the ability to produce and create and innovate. Austin, in your opinion, what would a successful tech entrepreneur say if asked if they think diversity is important? How would they defend making billions of dollars when there are people on the homeless? Any additional advice? I mean, I think diversity is a good thing, and you can spin it as a positive thing. And I think you should. I think if you asked about diversity, it's good to say that you value people who have different experiences and bring different perspectives to a problem. You hire people who are thinkers, but people who are thinkers who are different from one another is a value because they can challenge each other and stimulate each other and make each other better. So take diversity and make it yours. Don't talk about race. Don't talk about diversity in that sense. Talk about experiences and perspectives and contexts. And what you're looking for is thinkers who can bring different perspectives to a problem, different points of view, and different experiences and contexts to it. And then in terms of homeless, I would say the homeless problem, my making billions has nothing to do with the homeless problem. The homeless problem is a problem of government policy. It is a problem of a lack of housing. I actively provide funding to organizations that are trying to convince the public and the government to increase housing and therefore solve the problem of homelessness. But I produce, I create, and my production and my creation has nothing to do with homelessness. And I do not feel guilty for the fact that there are homeless people. It would be unearned guilt. I didn't create the homeless problem, and I can't solve it either. Hopper Campbell, what's the conference you're doing with Jordan Peterson in London? Will you have the chance to go one-on-one with him? I don't know. I have no idea what the program is. All I know is there's a conference being held in London. It's by invitation only. I don't know, there are going to be 1,000 people there maybe. Alex Epstein is one of the speakers. It's organized by Jordan Peterson. All the invitees are supposedly influencers, important people in the world. They promise there'll be a lot of opportunity to schmooze and to get to know each other and to talk to people. So I assume there'll be a lot of big shots there. I know already there are going to be a bunch of politicians. There are going to be some thinkers. I'm a little worried that it'll be too right-wing in a sense, but Jordan Peterson will be there. I don't know if I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what the point will be for me to have a one-on-one with Jordan Peterson. I mean, the only thing I want out of Jordan Peterson is to get invited to his podcast, and the only reason I want that is to get the exposure. I'm not interested in trying to convince Jordan Peterson of anything. I don't believe that's possible. I'm hoping to meet people at this event who might provide me with a platform to reach new people. That's basically my goal, and to give me a good pulse. Give me a good pulse on kind of what is going on in this particular intellectual world. What is going on? What's the direction the Jordan Peterson kind of intellectual ecosystem is going in? So it's intellectually interesting. I'm going to be there 2 days out of the 3 days. I'm not going to stay all 3 days. We'll see. I'll give you a report afterwards. It's in October. Liam says, are courageous people more rare than you originally believed? Yeah, no question. Intellectually courageous. I'm sure there are a lot of courageous people that would run into, a burning building and save a toddler, but intellectually courageous, there are very few. And there are very few independent thinkers. That's the real shock to me. It's not or just the courage, it's just the thinking. Wes, thank you. Wes did the $80 that got us to the goal, and then Okalok got us over the goal by $10. So thank you, Okalok. I appreciate it. Okay, Clark says, do sophisticated, even people often use compassion as camouflage? Yes, I think so. I think so. You can even see that a little bit in Tui, in The Fountainhead, where he sometimes uses compassion to camouflage and to manipulate, right? Michael, you've mentioned you believe Christianity is more explicitly anti-happiness and anti-human emotion than Islam. In what aspects and why did this manifest? That's a big topic. And it depends on the context. The reality is that that Islam is much more brutal towards women than Christianity is. So if you're a woman, you don't want to be in Islam. You don't want to be in Orthodox Judaism, ultra-Orthodox Judaism either. Christianity is much better at treating women than certainly Islam is, and Judaism is mixed. But certainly ultra-Orthodox Jews treat women pretty badly. Look, and this is going to be a quick outline, and somebody can sponsor me doing a show on this because I do think it's an interesting topic. Islam is a religion of the victorious. Islam is a religion of that was founded by a merchant turned warrior who conquered vast lands and instituted himself as the leader, both the religious and the political leader of the lands that he conquered. It's a religion where the founder of the religion was a man who made a lot of money, stole it, made it. He had many wives. In other words, he had lots of sex. He exuded self-confidence. He was a warrior. That's Muhammad. And that's the context in which Islam arises. It arises out of victory. It arises as a dominant religion. It arises as in conquest. It arises from traders. So Islam generally has, as much as you can in a religion, and as much as you can in that tradition, a pro-business perspective. It has a pro-sex perspective, for men at least. It has a certain confidence. It has a certain confidence about it. Christianity is the religion of the meek. Christianity is born of weakness. It is born of a prophet who is an outcast, who is unliked, who doesn't achieve anything in his life, who has a small following, a little cult, a little sect, doesn't conquer anything. As far as we know, doesn't have sex, doesn't have wives. It's a religion that loves virginity and loves, what do you call it? Anyway, it's a religion of political weakness. To seize on to Caesar, to God what is God. Not as a separation of church and state, but out of an existential threat. If we try to take what's Caesar's, Caesar will kill us all. So better leave Caesar alone. Now that changes with Constantine, but it's a religion that is born out of weakness. The meek shall inherit the earth. Islam doesn't believe the meek shall inherit the earth. Islam doesn't view meekness positively. It's a religion of chastity and celibacy and charity. And I mean, there's charity in Islam, but it's charity after making money, right? After you've made wealth, you give 10% of it away or whatever. Christianity is a persecuted religion, and I don't think you can understand the whole Christianity's attitude for hundreds of years, without understanding where it politically comes from. So the political context of religion matters. Where it arises from matters. Right? That Doodle Bunny, uneducated and angry, is a dangerous combination. Well, yes. Angry generally is not good. Liam says, who is the interview you did that you wish you hadn't sanctioned? Oh, I did an interview with somebody who turned out to be an anti-vaxxer and somebody who was pitching ivermectin and all this stuff during COVID. Are there any other interviews that I did? Yeah, I can't remember doing any other interviews that I regret, but I'm sure there might be others. I've tried to avoid doing ones that I really would. Yeah. I mean, I'm a little. Yeah, I mean, another one would be Micah Malice, the interview I did for Micah Malice, where, like, in between shots, he's pitching his book on anarchy. It's like, come on. So, I'd say those are the two. I mean, I like the interview I did with Micah Malice with Lex because it was more confrontational. And it was interesting and it was fun and so on. But just one-on-one with Malice, I think there's too much of a sanction there. James, do you think when Blake Scholl and BOOM became super successful and changed the world, Blake will publicly give credit to Ayn Rand and make his success possible? I don't know. I hope so. I really hope so. But you'll have to ask Blake. James G., how are banks downgrading in USA, Chinese exports declining, Southeast Asia growth the last 10 years, and Europe aging, all related? Did you see my other question about the stream? Well, banks are downgraded because of commercial real estate challenges in the United States, offices that are not paying rent, offices that sit empty, even residential. It turns out residential rental properties are declining in value because of high interest rates. So high interest rates have a lot to do with downgrading banks in the U.S. Chinese exports declining, I think, have a lot to do with production in China. It could have something to do with less purchasing, less interest in consumption, people having a lot of debt, and people more worried about starting to pay back student loans, having to pay back their credit card debt, having to pay off higher mortgages, less money to buy Chinese stuff. Probably more complicated than that, but that's one. And then Europe aging, I don't think is really related, other than Europe aging is seeing less production, less people working, and ultimately less saving, more consumption. As old people consume, they don't produce. But there's a lot more to be said on each one of those. Frank says, so is property theft or is it ownership? It's property is property, and ownership is ownership. So you own property. So no, it's not theft. Gail, maybe popular because many people are curious about who would be enthusiastic of a serious defensive strategy for America. Yeah, I mean, that seems like a pretty sophisticated reason, which I just don't associate with Americans right now. I find it interesting. I'm curious to find out why people are going to see the movie and what they like about it. I'm going to try to read some of the reviews that individual wrote about it. Okay, James, maybe clarifying his earlier questions. I'm seeing that it is easier to keep wealth in the UK and transfer it down. The majority of wealth is transferred down versus created in the US. I don't get that. I really don't get it. I mean, most of the wealth is created in the US. The US is the number one wealth creating engine in the world. There is no place that creates wealth more than the US. It's not transferred, it's created. UK taxes the middle class higher. Yeah, but the US is still taxing. And, where are you creating more wealth? I mean, the US entrepreneurs are creating massive amounts of wealth. And in terms of income is still taxed in the US. Maybe it's taxed lower than the UK. So you want to make your income in the US, invest that money, but there's no wealth tax in the US, so you're not going to be taxed on the wealth that you have. I'm just not sure. I'd have to see a much more longer reasoned argument that you might have about this to kind of comment on it in a way that makes sense. All right, William says, Jordan Peterson recently said in an interview that everything we do is an act of faith. He also thinks that rights come from the Ten Commandments. Yeah, I know. I mean, that is such a silly perspective on what faith means. Like, I know that if I drop this pen on the floor, that it's going to fall to the ground. Is that an act of faith? Do I have faith that it's going to fall to the floor? No. I know as a fact of reality. So he is basically buying into Humean skepticism. We don't know anything. Anything could change. Gravity could disappear tomorrow. We don't know. Next time you drop the pen, it might not fall. It might rise. Of course, if gravity shifted, you're probably dead before you experiment with the pen. So it's such a silly way, an unintellectual and silly way to think about faith and to think about human knowledge. And the fact that rights come from the Ten Commandments, good luck with that one. Good luck with that one. Which commandment? The first one that says there's only one God and you shouldn't do anything in his image, shouldn't have sculpture and painting. Does it come from honoring your mother and your father? Is that where rights come from? Where do they come from? Commandments? How do rights come from commandments? I don't think he understands what rights are if he thinks that. So, Jordan Peterson is much worse today than he was, I think, 5 years ago. Or maybe he's just spoken now so much that it's all become clear how bad he always was. But the more clarity we get about Jordan Peterson, the more we know how bad he is, basically. And he's terrible. He's just terrible. Yeah, yes, James G says, yes, it's my point that they go to the U.S. to make income. But then why not? But you also want the wealth here because U.S. stock market is the best performing stock market. Capital gains taxes in the U.S. are relatively low as compared to other countries in the world. I don't understand the moving strategy unless you're moving to Puerto Rico, and then I get it. JP, I don't know if he had a breakdown, but he was sick, and he was a coma for months in Russia. So he was addicted to painkillers, drugs that he was taking, antidepressants. I can't remember what it was, but a drug he was taking. He became addicted to it. Getting out of addiction turned out to be disastrous. He claims nobody in the United States and Canada could treat him. So he had to go to Russia to be treated, but in Russia, the treatment caused him to go into a coma for months, and then he came out of the coma. So maybe that is the breakdown that you're referring to. He definitely hasn't been the same since he came back from that, and he's on this meat-only diet where he eats a steak for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That can't be good for you either. So there's something... Anyway, I'm less interested in Jordan and more interested in the kind of crowd and in the direction they go to because I'm an intellectual and I have to keep track of these things. And I'm interested in who's going to be there and what are the issues that they care about. All right. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. I appreciate the support. We got our target. That's fantastic. We did that this morning and today and tonight. Tomorrow morning, we'll have another show. Thursday, we'll do a show in the evening as well. I'm not sure what the topic will be. I don't think I have an interviewee yet. One of the next few shows are going to be about the dollar. Somebody has sponsored a show to talk about the dollar, its history, what it is, what the future is, and so on. So we will definitely do a show on the dollar, whether that'll be Saturday or next week. Next week will be a little tricky because I'm traveling a couple of days. But we'll figure it all out. Anyway, I'll see you all tomorrow morning. Thank you for all the support. And talk to you guys soon. Don't forget, if you want to support the show on a monthly basis, Patreon or PayPal.